The Earth above you weighs 2 million tons, and the only thing keeping it from crushing your lungs is a few splintering planks of timber. You haven't seen the sun in weeks, but the darkness isn't the danger. It's the silence.
It's coming down.
In this suffocating narrow passage, 60 feet below the trenches of the Western Front, silence doesn't mean safety. It means the enemy has stopped digging. It means they are listening for you, or worse, they have already finished planting the explosives that will turn this tunnel into a communal grave. This is not the war of bayonets and bugles. This is a war of dirt, nerves, and the slow, agonizing realization that you are buried alive before you are even dead. Thomas, a former coal miner from the deep seams of South Wales, leans his back against a rotting wooden frame. His breath comes in shallow, measured gulps. In the tunnels of Flanders, air is a luxury, a dwindling resource that smells of damp chalk, stale sweat, and the faint, sweet, metallic tang of low oxygen. He isn't holding a rifle. His weapon is a spade with a shortened handle, and his armor is a thick coat of gray, slimy mud. He is a claykicker. He spends his days lying on a wooden cross, using his legs to drive his spade into the heavy soil, carving out a world that the sun forgot. The technique is nearly silent, a necessary survival skill. If the Germans, just a few feet through the wall of clay, hear the rhythmic thud of a shovel, the response is swift and lethal. They will dig their own countermine, a frantic race to see who can plant a charge first. It is a game of cat and mouse, played in a lightless labyrinth, where the prize for the winner is a few more days of breathing, and the penalty for the loser is to be compressed into the strata of the earth itself. Thomas pauses, his legs trembling from the effort. He reaches for a tallow candle stuck into the wall. The flame is small, flickering, and dangerously blue. The blue flame is a warning. It is the breath of the black damp, a cocktail of carbon monoxide and nitrogen that can extinguish a man's life in seconds without him ever realizing he is dying. Thomas watches the flame dance, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knows that if the light goes out, he has less than a minute to reach the vertical shaft and climb toward the surface. But he cannot leave. Not yet. He is a listener today. He reaches for his geophone, a primitive but sensitive instrument, and presses the earpieces to his head. He closes his eyes, trying to separate the sound of his own blood rushing through his ears from the secrets of the soil. At first, there is nothing, just the immense, oppressive weight of the world. Then, a vibration. It isn't the distant rumble of artillery from the surface. This is local. It is a rhythmic, metallic scratching. Scrape, pause, scrape. Thomas freezes. The sound is coming from the left, less than 5 feet away. The Germans are there. They aren't just digging a gallery, they are digging toward him. He can almost hear the breath of the man on the other side of the wall. In this moment, they aren't enemies in a political sense. They are two ghosts sharing a tomb, waiting to see who will become the architect of the other's demise. The scratching stops. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the noise. Thomas knows what it means. The enemy has reached their destination. They are likely charging the face, filling the end of their tunnel with high explosives to create a camouflage. A camouflage is a localized blast designed not to break the surface, but to shatter the enemy's tunnel system. It turns the ground into a liquid shockwave, snapping timber supports like toothpicks and crushing the lungs of anyone caught in the gallery. Thomas has to decide. Does he crawl back and report the danger, or does he stay and try to determine exactly where the charge is being placed? He stays. The psychological toll of this underground conflict is a heavy blanket that never lifts. In the tunnels, you lose the sense of time. Day and night are meaningless concepts. You live by the vibration of the earth and the flickering of a candle. Many men break. They develop the tunneler's twitch, a nervous habit of constantly looking upward, waiting for the ceiling to bow and snap. Thomas feels the pressure of the earth through the soles of his boots. He imagines the millions of tons of mud pressing down, eager to reclaim the space he has stolen from it. He thinks of his partner, a boy from Leeds who was caught in a collapse last month. They never found the body. The earth simply swallowed him, leaving behind nothing but a discarded boot and a half-eaten tin of rations. As the summer of 1917 approaches, the tension beneath the Messines Ridge reaches a breaking point. For over a year, the British and Commonwealth miners have been engaged in one of the most ambitious engineering projects in military history. They have carved out over 20 massive mines, some of them deep beneath the German strongpoints. These aren't small charges. These are massive chambers filled with hundreds of thousands of pounds of ammonal. The logistics are staggering. Thousands of men have worked in total secrecy, hauling out tons of white spoil in the dead of night, hiding it under camouflage netting to prevent German planes from spotting the activity. Thomas is assigned to Hill 60, a notorious sector where the lines are so close that the miners can hear the Germans talking. The Germans know something is happening. They have been countermining aggressively. Every day the sound of German picks gets louder. Thomas sits in a small niche, his ears pressed to the cold, damp chalk. He can hear them. They are so close he can hear the clink of a mess tin. The British command is faced with a horrific choice. If they blow the mines too early, the planned offensive will be ruined. If they wait, the Germans might find the main charge and destroy it, killing everyone in the tunnel. Wait is the order. For 3 days, Thomas and his crew sit in the dark, next to tons of high explosives, listening to the Germans dig directly toward them. It is a test of nerves that defies description. Every scrape of a German shovel against the wall of their chamber feels like a knife across their skin. They sit in silence, not even whispering, their eyes fixed on the timber sets that are beginning to groan under the stress. They are sitting on a powder keg, waiting for a spark that could come from either side of the wall.
God, we're hit!
At 3:10 a.m. on June 7, 1917, the silence of the Western Front is obliterated. The 19 mines that were successfully detonated at Messines created one of the largest man-made explosions in history prior to the atomic age. The shockwave was so powerful it was felt in London, and the sound was reportedly heard as far away as Dublin. For those on the surface, it looked like the earth had opened up to swallow the sky. Entire hillsides vanished in an instant, replaced by craters hundreds of feet wide and deep. 10,000 German soldiers were killed in seconds, most of them buried alive before they could even scream. But for the men below ground, like Thomas, the experience was different. As the charges went off, the tunnels didn't just shake, they breathed. The air was sucked out by the vacuum of the blast, then slammed back in with the force of a hammer. The earth became fluid. Thomas felt the floor heave upward, throwing him against the ceiling. The timber sets snapped with the sound of 1,000 gunshots. In the darkness, he heard the roar of falling earth. He was lucky. His section of the tunnel held, but the exit was gone. He was trapped in a pocket of air, 60 feet below a landscape that had been fundamentally altered. The hours that followed were a descent into a specific kind of madness. Thomas had a small hand shovel and a dying flashlight. He began to dig. He didn't know if he was digging toward the surface or deeper into the abyss. The air grew thick and heavy, the carbon dioxide building up with every frantic breath. He survived by licking the moisture off the clay walls, his fingers raw and bleeding as he clawed at the rubble. In the total darkness, the mind plays tricks. He heard the voices of the men he had lost, their whispers coming from the very soil he was trying to move. He saw lights that weren't there. He felt the weight of the 2 million tons pressing against his back, a physical entity that wanted him to stop, to lie down, and to become part of the earth. When Thomas finally broke through into a British sap 3 days later, he was unrecognizable. He was a creature of gray mud and fractured nerves. His fingernails were gone, replaced by jagged, bloody stumps. He didn't celebrate. He couldn't speak. He simply sat in the trench, staring at the sun, with eyes that had forgotten what light looked like. He was a survivor of the secret war, but he would carry the tunnels with him for the rest of his life. He would never again be able to sit in a quiet room. The silence reminded him too much of the moments before the earth moved. The War of the Miners was a conflict of endurance and nerves, lacking the grand maneuvers of the infantry, but possessing a raw, primal horror. It was a battle of inches, fought in the mud and the dark, by men who knew that their next breath might be their last. They were the ghosts of the trenches, operating in a realm where the rules of conventional warfare didn't apply. Victory wasn't measured in captured territory, but in the silence that followed a successful excavation. When the war finally ended, the tunnels were largely filled in or allowed to collapse. But the landscape of northern France and Belgium remains scarred by their efforts. The massive craters, now filled with stagnant water and surrounded by trees, serve as silent monuments to the men who fought beneath them. These caterpillar craters are some of the only surviving topographical features of the 1917 battlefield. They are hollow reminders of the violence that once shook the foundations of the world. There is something inherently unsettling about the thought of this hidden world beneath our feet, a world born from such desperate conflict. Historians who venture into the few surviving tunnels today speak of an overwhelming sense of presence. They find discarded boots, rusted tools, and even initials carved into the chalk walls, looking as fresh as the day they were made. It is a moment frozen in time, preserved by the very earth that threatened to consume its inhabitants. The psychological scars left on the survivors were unique. Many returned home unable to sleep in a house with a basement. The tunnelers' twitch became a common sight in the veteran hospitals of the 1920s. They had spent so much time worrying about the ceiling falling in that their bodies refused to believe they were finally safe. They lived the rest of their lives in a state of hypervigilance, their ears tuned to vibrations that no one else could hear. They had faced the ultimate fear, the slow, silent approach of a burial while still breathing. Even today, the threat hasn't entirely vanished. The ground in these regions will occasionally subside, revealing a forgotten shaft or a collapsed gallery. In the 1950s, a lightning strike triggered one of the forgotten mines at Messines, a charge that had failed to detonate in 1917. It blew a crater in a farmer's field, a terrifying echo of a war that refused to stay buried. there is still at least one massive mine lost somewhere beneath the soil of Belgium, its location forgotten in the chaos of the retreat, waiting in the dark for a reason to wake up. The story of the tunnels is not just a story of engineering. It is a story of the human spirit pushed to its absolute limits. It is about the bond between men who shared a few square feet of oxygen and the terrifying responsibility of holding back the weight of the world. They were the architects of a hidden catastrophe and the residents of a darkness that most of us can barely comprehend. Their war ended over a century ago, but the echoes of their pickaxes still ripple through the soil. As we look across the peaceful fields of the former Western Front today, the wind hides the memory of the rhythmic thud of the Claykicker's spade. But for those who know where to look, the signs are there. The depressions in the earth, the strange patterns in the crops, and the local legends of voices heard in the deep woods, all point to a subterranean world that still holds its breath. The earth is a patient witness. It absorbs the trauma, the steel, and the stories, covering them with layers of new life. But for those who were there, the darkness was not just an absence of light. It was a physical weight, a presence that stayed with them long after they emerged into the blinding glare of the world above. The mystery of what remains hidden in those deep, damp corridors only grows, a dark thriller written in the soil and signed in the silence of the deep.